Back everyone here in Lough Resort and also everyone joining us virtually as well. We're entering the final session of the day, session 4, and it's going to be looking at the legacy of the project itself. So a really good opportunity to talk through, I suppose, what has been left and what is the learning as well. So I'm delighted to reintroduce Diane Foster, back on the stage, Project Manager, Source to Tap. Lorraine Gaston, Catchment Scientist with Irish Water. Donnacha Doody, Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute. Phil Jordan, who we heard from just before the break, Professor of Catchment Science at Ulster University. Lorraine Stewart, Finance and Personnel Officer, East Border Region. And Mark Horton is back on the stage. There's Mark. Lisa Stewart is back on the stage. And we're also joined by Catherine Glass, who's also back on the stage at the end. Thank you very much for joining us. So there's lots of people to talk to. I'd encourage everyone watching, if you want any more questions, use Slido and we'll get them in and we'll put them to the panellists as well. Just check to make sure your mobile phones are off as well, ladies and gentlemen, if that's okay. Mark, I wonder, with the legacy of this 5-year project, I was really struck by something, I don't think he's here, the gentleman from Irish Water this morning said, which was they had set up 8 years. The learning that they got from the partnership with Northern Ireland Water was 20 years sort of worth of learning. And it strikes me that that's an incredible legacy, if nothing else, of a project like this, that you have that cooperation, partnership, data sharing, information sharing, and also, I'm sure a lot of you know each other anyway, but events like this where people are brought together with a common purpose as well. It's quite a legacy from a project.
Yeah, it was always the plan, of course, that anything that was done through the Source to Tap project would be available as a learning to everybody right across this island and further afield. And so we always undertook our activities keeping in mind that we would present this information back to everyone through a legacy website. And that legacy website is currently under construction. I just caveat that in case anybody jumps on expecting to see everything. It's slowly getting there and will be completed by the end of June. But that is the repository for all of the information, all of the science, all of the economics, the community engagement, and even some of the tools that we've developed. For example, the education program and the citizen science tools that we have for our community members who've been trained in the riverfly monitoring technique. So that website will be the repository for all of the information so that others can take that learning and learn from what worked well for us, but also what didn't work well. And we're very honest about that. We're very honest about telling people the things that maybe didn't go to plan and some of the learnings from the project so that others could avoid perhaps some of the pitfalls that we fell into. And there have been a few along the way. Diane will agree with that and all the members on the panel, which sure that's part of the learning process. So I think, it's great for us as a project panel to hear others commenting on what we've done. And like you said, that comment earlier about, 20 years of learning from this 5-year project is really a testament to not just the people in this room that have helped the Source to Tap project on a daily basis, but all of the other people who we can't mention because there's too many of them that have brought knowledge, expertise, skills to bear to make this project possible. And we do hope that not just water companies, but land managers, farmers and teachers in schools will all be able to use all of the outputs of Source to Tap long beyond the end of the funded project.
And Diane, it's not in the spirit of ending the conference to dwell too much on the negatives, but I think it's kind of interesting to think about what Mark hinted at there, which was the things that mightn't have gone too well, the challenges that you found. Was there anything, when talking about legacy, there's a lot of learning in that. Was there anything that stuck out for you in that regard? The kind of challenges that you had to go through, that you faced? Obviously there was Brexit and COVID, but putting them aside.
Yes, implementing things on a cross-border nature with a range of partners, there are challenges. The land incentive scheme was very challenging. The European funding comes with a lot of rules, and they have been challenging at times to ensure that how we would implement the scheme would comply with all those rules. So that has it's certainly increased the workload, and you have to kind of keep finding mechanisms and ways forward to navigate those sort of parameters. So yeah, that has been a challenge, but there's been positive side of that as well, because we've had to probably have such an onerous claims and payments procedure. It meant that we worked very closely with the farmers. So there's, you have to, I think in this project we've very much had a can-do attitude as a partnership. We've come up against a lot of issues, not just the COVID and the Brexit and those sort of things, and climate rainfall events and things. But we've always said to ourselves, right, well, how do we get around this? What can we do to make this work? And that's, I think, been one of the big benefits and from the partnership. Very much can do.
Lorraine, Gaston from Irish Water, what do you see as the best legacy from this project?
I guess it's kind of a couple of things really. That one that stands out to me is the partnerships that we've developed and working with all these other organisations. Like having the European funding has given us that opportunity to work together, and I guess for people to take like a shared ownership within the project and bring their own expertise, and for us to learn from one another. And like it's been alluded to earlier, like we've learned quite a lot on the project because we're quite new. Excuse me. We're quite new as a utility, so we really appreciate what we've learned from working with the other partners.
And will it, or how will it, in as much as you know, inform the work of Irish Water in Ireland? I mean, do you take inspiration from the partnerships and the approach?
Yeah, definitely. I guess we're already bringing in the learnings from what we've learnt into the work that we do. Like even just our knowledge on how MCPA behaves in the environment has come a long way in the last 5 years. What might have seemed like random exceedances, we actually understand how they're happening now, and we can use that information to target advice with people on the ground. And excuse me. And I guess the other thing is we're also starting our own pilot project for the first time, and we can bring in a lot of the learnings from Source to Tap into that, and like Diane and Mark has said what to do and what not to do.
So you've got a head start there. Lorraine, Stewart, I mean, obviously EU funding made this possible. So what's next? I mean, how do you ensure, I mean, it was a big chunk of money that was made available, which is needed for a project of this scale.
I suppose just to start with, just to build on what Diane had said, with EU funding comes a lot of rules and regulations. So, I mean, I think that we've talked about the success of this project and it achieving its outputs. There was a lot going on in the background in terms of drawing those funds down. Here, ourselves from East Border region have worked across every one of the Interreg projects to date. We have come in as an interim sort of resource here in terms of maximising the drawdown and minimising the risks in terms of penalties and that which the project has been very successful in. Going forward, I suppose it was spoke about earlier by Paul Beattie from the Special EU Programmes body. In terms of there will be a 1.1 billion euro programme, the Peace Plus programme. Hopefully it's with the Commission at the minute, as he says, and hopefully with SUPB will be formally launching it in June. There is a number of themes underneath that to build on within the Source to Tap project. I mean, there's a great basis there for this project to fit in there, in terms of future funding. It will be an open call. It will be going through an application process. So every project will be, scored on its own merit. But this is a very successful partnership, very successful project, so there is a real basis for it going forward.
Because we heard earlier, Lorraine, from Mark talking about the dynamics, the connections that have been made, you know, the trust that's there. I mean, is there a concern that might dissipate and just sort of disappear? You're back at square one unless funding comes quickly?
I don't think, I mean, it's in the pipeline now. I mean, everybody is doing a bit of preparatory work now on that. I think the aim is to be up and running and get the ball rolling as soon as the call comes out. So I think the partnership will continue in the background.
Do you have anything to say on that, Lisa? The importance of maintaining the partnership and the kind of the relationships with the stakeholders involved?
Yes, I suppose. I suppose the nature of the projects, they're 5 years, 6 year projects. I suppose you'd be worried about turnover of staff and things like that. But I suppose when the links are established and it's been successful, people want to work together. They know who they can work with. So I suppose once the relationship is established and it's working well, I suppose there's scope forward as long as the money comes.
And do you get a sense that something has been unlocked, for example, with the farmers, that if another group comes in, that it may be easier to work with them as a group, you know, that they have taken a step forward, that it'll be hard to take a step back?
It would, yeah. I suppose it would be easy to just go back to the same areas and build relationships again, but I suppose it took a long time to do that. So I suppose just adding on from that, keep going. I don't think we can go back. I think this is the way forward, advisory led, and yeah.
Donnacha, can I come to you? I mean, what's your sense of the legacy of this project? I suppose I often think with scientists, they work on much longer timescales, you know, funding rounds of a couple of years and all the rest. But what would be your sense of it?
Well, I think throughout today, people have been talking about, you know, right measures in the right place has been one of the things that people have repeatedly mentioned. Also, the importance of advisor-led work. Now, to date, we really haven't had the evidence base to show that advisor-based work is the way forward. It's one thing us putting the measures in the right place, but the real difference is going to be that behavioural change that happens alongside that. And key to that is the advisors. So I think the fact that we have the evidence base now showing that we improve water quality and it's cost effective to do that is really key in terms of future policy developments. Because I know it's something, and it's something that was brought up with me earlier with Herbie. How do we scale something like this over the whole of Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland? That's quite a challenge. And what's the model that we use to do that? Because I mean, the current model that we have with government-led advisors may not be the model we use. But how do we do that? So I think it's the key thing for me is shown that this approach works. But now, how do we take it further in terms of scaling it up across the whole of the island?
Do you have those answers?
I wish I did. Yeah, no. But I think one thing I would say is that we do need to look at these sort of partnerships that have happened here, because it's the strengths of each of the partners here that led to the success of the Source to Tap project. And it may be that, you know, working with NGOs, working with farmers' organisations, for them to be delivering advice and measures on the ground may be a way forward in the future.
And Catherine, at the end, you were, you know, your presentation, for every £1 invested through the Source to Tap project, there'll be $3.36 worth of benefits. How do you use that figure to get more water companies on board? You know, is there a way beyond just stating those facts that can be leveraged?
Sure. I think it's drawing more attention to the fact that costs really do escalate. You know, capital and operational costs really do escalate with exceedances. But also even, you know, the cost of the weed wiping was relatively small in terms of the overall budget. So you can do a lot with a relatively small amount of money. But I think what would encourage me longer term is that, well, I know that Lorraine Gaston was talking about work that they're doing in UCD, and they're trying to bring partners together to look at private sources of funding. So that's what we'd like to see as well. You know, not to kind of stretch the public purse too much, but, you know, look for other outlets as well. And I'd like to see a bit more of that going forward. So that's quite an exciting thing. You know, even local businesses keen to, you know, promote themselves environmentally, you know, and just willing to invest in these schemes. So I'm hoping that, you know, going forward, that will, that will just bring extra money in to be able to do more.
Phil, how does that sound to you, the idea of private funding coming in? I mean, certainly scientists that I've spoken to can get a little bit twitchy about that idea, but do you think that that is the sensible way forward?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Maybe I'm twitchy.
But talk us through that, because at the end of the day, the research has to happen. The scientists have to also be on the ground coming up with the solutions. And is it something that for you would be a good solution in the future?
Well, I guess, the research does need funding, the questions need answering, and I guess maybe private-public partnerships are the way to go to maintain that momentum.
Mark, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think just reflecting on what Phil's saying, there's probably a recipe of public and private funding going forward. Maybe, in terms of the research, it could be money like we've seen here through Interreg, but there's no reason why private funding couldn't be used to fund measures on the ground. So, companies or organisations that want to put forward funds to help with environmental projects would do far worse than maybe just putting it into projects like we've delivered, where we're delivering real tangible benefits on the ground. They're not just benefiting the water environment, but they're also benefiting the community that those measures are being installed in. So a combination of funding, I think, would be a very sensible recipe going forward, because certainly with the likes of European money that we're using now and other pots of state money, for want of a better term, there's not a great deal of sustainability in them. They're over short periods of time, or relatively short periods of time. There's no guarantee they're going to be there in the next 5 or 10 years. Whereas I do believe as we move forward, more and more companies will want to invest in environmental projects, particularly at a local scale.
Diane, you might talk a little bit. We haven't talked a huge amount about the role of citizen science in this, and what you did during the project in terms of training up these citizens. There's 43 of them, the citizen scientists. I mean, that in itself is an interesting legacy, isn't it? Not least the 1,947 children that were involved as well. Can you talk a little bit about that in regards to the legacy that you leave?
Yes, it's amazing to get out there into the catchments and see the enthusiasm there is for our rivers and lakes, and to work with local communities and to build that capacity. It provides training to people, to individuals. It gives them confidence, it gives them new skills, and it gets them out there monitoring their local rivers. So it is a fantastic legacy. So after we've gone, they've got the resources now within equipment and skills to stay out there and to keep an eye on our rivers, and to be reporting up onto national databases, and to be monitoring where there are issues. So I think it's been a very, very valuable element of Source to Tap. It's, we talked about this morning about how it wasn't just about, these cost-effective measures and catchment scale approaches. It's very much about education as well. And I think there is a really important role for us all in educating and raising awareness about, I've said earlier, about where our water comes from, where our drinking water comes from. So getting out there and working with the communities is vital.
I suppose, Donnacha, there's one thing having a very enthused group of people while a project is ongoing. When the project stops, how do you keep that enthusiasm going? Certainly with citizen science, where you're asking them for results or whatever, and then suddenly that doesn't come anymore. Is there a way to keep the enthusiasm going? Is there schools the best way?
Well, I think schools is an excellent way. I think that's probably a real targeted way. I think we do, there's all the normal stuff that we do, like newsletters and so forth. But one of the interesting things, I think, that's that AFBI and the University of Ulster, and I'll pass over to Phil to mention about this, is using these mobile monitoring stations that can go back around to these sort of locations and show people the link between the data and land use practices. Phil, do you want to say something about those, what you're doing with that, yourself and Rachel?
Yeah, so one of the things we've been working with AFBI over the last few years is to increase the amount of data capture. Capture the processes that are occurring on a day-by-day or even hour-by-hour basis, and using that to inform people that might be living in catchments or working in catchments. And that's been very successful, but we keep that instrumentation at one site permanently. Well, the next stage is to put everything into some kind of mobile environment and tow it from place to place and have short-term measurements and see how that can affect or help with knowledge exchange and knowledge transfer and ultimately behavioural change.
It's an interesting question because it seems like we live in an era where there's more data available than ever, and yet we had this morning, you know, the discussions about the farmers not getting the data, not knowing about MCPA and all the rest. I mean, are there any ideas about the delivery of that data? How is the best way to deliver data? I mean, it's one thing scientists looking at it and analysing it. It's another thing a Joe Soap like me or a farmer or whatever doing it. Mark?
Yeah, I think Terence touched on this actually this morning. People absorb information in different ways, and I think as far as the community are concerned, as far as the farming community are concerned in particular, it's taking that information and putting it into a practical setting so they can see how it applies to what they're actually doing. We ran a number of on-farm demonstration events during the project, which you heard about briefly. The engagement from that was phenomenal. The feedback we got from those that attended was really positive. They were going away from that saying, well, I didn't realise this was happening to my local river. I didn't realise that making such a small change could make such a big difference. So we can present very technical information in quite a simple way. And I think that's what we all need to be focusing on. There's the other aspect of this that I think people aren't ready to absorb information until they are ready to hear it. So if you sit people down in a room and just fire a load of slides and data at them, they'll probably hear the first 2 minutes of it and then they'll switch off. Whereas if you're standing in the middle of a field with a weed wiper, with a boom sprayer, the machinery is going, as Terence said earlier, landowners are talking to each other. They're actually not just learning from the information you're presenting them, but they're actually bringing more information to the discussion. So it becomes a two-way flow of information. I think that's going to be very critical going forward, that we have this kind of localized sharing of information in a variety of formats so that people can consume it and pick it up. And it's also drip-fed constantly. So instead of it just being a one hit and they get this information, it maybe has an impression on them for a week or two and then they forget about it. They actually hear it again and then a little bit again on the radio, and then they maybe see it a little bit again in the newspaper, and slowly but surely that builds up a knowledge base within the community about all the issues that we're trying to address.
Phil?
Yeah, we actually formalised this into in the project as a dissemination model we call the root, branch and leaf model, where the roots of our dissemination routes were scientifically peer-reviewed publications or really heavy-duty reports. Our branches were more kind of digestible, so that might be short reports or media events or things like this. And then the leaves would be items that were everywhere. So they could be tweets, they could be short articles, something that would reach many people, because we recognise that our audience has ranged from hard scientists to policy people, industry people, and the general public and the farming community. So it needed to follow that model.
And as a scientist, do you see that now as your greater role and responsibility to make sure that you reach as deep as you can into people?
It's really important. I mean, for me personally as a scientist, the two things that I have to keep an eye on is that the science is published and peer-reviewed, and that reaches an international audience, and it has great policy impact. But impact is the key word there. It has to reach the whole of society, and that means you have to break down your research into something more digestible, and that could be in the single messages, one-liners, newspaper articles, whatever it might be. So it's very important.
Donnacha, you're agreeing there?
Yeah, I think the sort of stuff Phil's talking about there is really important in terms of newspaper articles, reports and so forth. But the real challenge for us going forward is how do we make the sort of data we generate accessible to farmers and landowners in real time? And that's something we haven't really kind of got to yet. Now, there is steps being made in that direction, but that's going to be the real kind of, if we can get over that point, then we're going to make a huge impact on how farmers manage their land going forward.
And Diane, just to finish, I mean, I suppose also parallel to that is how do you get action in terms of policymakers and the results and the findings of what you've achieved here filter into the decisions that are being made, the spending of public money and all the rest?
Well, it's all about talking. It's all about sharing information. We've been really passionate about that from the start of this project. We have had external advisory group meetings where we've brought together stakeholders from north and south, from different organisations, from all the different elements of the project that we've covered, because it's so important to get people in the room together and get them talking, sharing ideas, sharing best practice. And that's just been such a big part of this project. So today is useful. Today we've had policymakers here. We're grateful for their time in coming and sharing with us and hearing the outputs from the project. And I suppose it's over to them now, you know. So hopefully some of the work of the project will be picked up and reviewed and looked at.
And finally, not to put you under any pressure, but when will the Legacy website be completed?
Next few weeks.
Lovely.
So we'll send a link round to everybody. So after today, the focus has been on getting today, and after getting past today, the focus now shifts to getting everything proofreaded and up on the website. So watch this space, not long.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for a very interesting discussion, ladies and gentlemen. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm delighted to say that before we close today's sessions, I'm going to introduce Dymphna Gallagher, Head of Drinking Water Regulation in Northern Ireland Water, to say a few words. Dymphna.
Thank you, Ella. And this is, yes, a very, very quick couple of words for you. Just to say, super event. Really, really, I thought it was a really great event. And thank you so much to Ella. And thank you so much to the guys in the Rivers Trust, particularly Joanna and Mark and Rebecca at the back, who's been quietly working away the whole way through. The technical guys, all of the people here who have done so much to make this a super event. And all of the people at home, thank you very much for your attendance as well. It's been a great project, and it's been a project that I've had in my sort of love of this project, I suppose, for quite a long time, for 7-8 years, right from the very inception. And a lot of the people here today, and a lot of the people that have been on this project have been here the whole way through. So real strong thanks to those guys. And to Diane Foster as well. I have to mention Diane particularly because as project manager, it's been difficult at times. You know, this is a very complicated project. I always describe it like a spider's web. There's the farming, the peatland. You have one thing, you think you're talking to children one minute, you're doing education the next minute, and then you're talking to a farmer. It's so interesting and so great. And there's so many opportunities and so many bases have been covered in this project. So I think there's a quote up here, and what you've heard today, I'm not going to go through any of that, but the messages have been very loud, very clear, and beautifully done, I think, by the guys, everybody that spoke and participated today. But this project, the work that has been done, it will inform us, it's informing us now, and it will continue to inform practical methodologies, practical ways of doing things. And we can all play our part in that fight against climate change, which is really a big part of what this project can do. It's all the little things that we're doing, they all add up to such a big potential improvement. And in the words of David Attenborough, so he talked when he got an award this year, I'm sure some of you heard it, and I can't remember the name of the award, but it was something like Champion of the World or Champion of the Earth or some wonderful name like that. It was only just earlier on in the year, and I'm paraphrasing now, but what he was saying is that we know now what we can do, and the Source to Tap project has shown us lots of little things that we can do in this country and other countries, and now we need to get on with it and do it. So thank you very much to everybody, and that's the closing remarks from me. So safe home, everybody, and safe, you can all go and relax now at home as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.